The lecture hall on Velaris Prime was filled with cadets from 12 different species, all of them eager to learn about the most dangerous creatures in the known. Galaxy Professor Rickstall stood at the front of the room, his compound eyes scanning the rows of students as his thin insectoid legs clicked against the polished floor. He was a Selenari, a species known for their academic achievements and their complete aversion to physical danger. For 30 cycles he had studied Deathworld fauna from the safety of research stations and orbital platforms, and he considered himself the foremost expert on creatures that could kill in seconds today. He would share that knowledge with the next generation of Alliance military officers. "Welcome to Xenobiology of Extreme Environments," he announced, his translator converting his clicking speech into smooth galactic standard. "In this course you will learn about the most terrifying creatures ever discovered. Beasts so deadly that entire colonization efforts have been abandoned because of their presence." He activated the holographic display behind him, and a three-dimensional image of a serpentine creature with glowing red eyes appeared. Several cadets in the front row leaned back in their seats. "This is the acid-blooded crawler of Nexer 5. Rickstall explained with obvious satisfaction at their reaction. "It secretes a compound that can dissolve through military-grade hull plating in under 30 seconds. And it hunts by sensing the electromagnetic signatures of its prey from over 2 kilometers away." Valtteri Cadet raised his scaled hand. "Professor, has anyone ever survived an encounter with one of these?" 3 survey teams were sent to Nexer 5, Rickstall replied. "None returned, and we only know about this creature from the fragmentary data they transmitted before their deaths." He changed the hologram to show a massive 4-legged predator covered in bony plates, the siege beast of Rethus Major, capable of running at speeds exceeding most ground vehicles and strong enough to flip an armored transport. The cadets murmured among themselves, and Rickstall felt the familiar thrill of commanding their attention through fear. He had given this lecture hundreds of times, and it never failed to impress upon young officers the importance of proper threat assessment. In the back row of the hall, a human female sat quietly with her hands folded on her desk. Her name was Katie Brooks, and she had been enrolled at the Galactic Alliance Military Academy for only 6 months. She was one of only 4 humans at the institution, and she had learned quickly that her species was still largely unknown to the wider galaxy. Most aliens she met had never seen a human before, and those who had often seemed nervous around her for reasons she did not fully understand. Katie listened to the professor describe one horrifying creature after another, and she found herself comparing each one to animals from her homeworld. The acid-blooded crawler reminded her of certain jellyfish that drifted through Earth's oceans. The siege beast was impressive, but she had seen videos of rhinoceros charges that seemed just as dangerous. She kept these thoughts to herself and continued taking notes in the simple electronic pad on her desk. "Now we come to the classification system," Rickstall continued. "Planets are rated on a danger scale from Class 1 to Class 7, with Class 1 being suitable for any species and Class 7 being completely incompatible with sentient life." He pulled up a chart showing the distribution of known worlds. "As you can see, the vast majority of inhabited planets fall between Class 1 and Class 3, with a few hardy species managing to evolve on Class 4 worlds." A Pralaxian cadet with soft blue fur raised her paw. "What about Class 5 and above, Professor?" Rickstall's compound eyes glittered with academic enthusiasm. "Excellent question. Class 5 worlds have been surveyed by drone, but no colonization has ever been attempted. The risk is simply too great." He paused for dramatic effect. "Class 6 worlds are theoretical. We have identified a few candidates, but never sent even unmanned probes due to the extreme conditions." "And Class 7? Another cadet asked. The professor's antennae twitched with what might have been excitement or fear. Class 7 worlds are the stuff of nightmares. Places where every single aspect of the environment seems designed to kill. From the atmosphere to the weather to the wildlife. He changed the display to show a blue and green planet covered in swirling white clouds. This is the only confirmed Class 7 world in our database. A planet in an unremarkable system at the edge of explored space. Katie felt her stomach tighten as she recognized the familiar continents and oceans. The local designation for this world translates roughly as Earth or dirt. Rixdale explained, "Our survey drones documented conditions that defy belief. A single star that bombards the surface with radiation. Massive bodies of salt water filled with predators. Unstable tectonic plates that cause devastating ground tremors. And weather patterns that can spawn rotating columns of wind strong enough to destroy entire settlements." The cadets stared at the hologram with expressions of horror and fascination. The wildlife is equally nightmarish. The professor continued, clearly enjoying himself. Pack hunters that can run for hours without stopping. Ambush predators that weigh over 500 kilograms. Venomous creatures in nearly every ecosystem. And parasites that can consume a host from the inside. He shook his head, his antennae swaying with the motion. It is frankly a miracle that this planet produced any complex life at all. And our xenobiologists agree that no sentient species could possibly evolve in such conditions. Katie bit her lip to keep from speaking. She glanced across the room and saw Danny Cole, another human cadet. Watching her with raised eyebrows, he seemed to be silently asking if she was going to say something. She gave a tiny shake of her head. Their orientation briefing had been very clear on this point. Humans were to keep a low profile during their first years in the Alliance. Revealing too much too quickly might create diplomatic complications. Let this be a lesson to all of you. Bristol concluded, the universe is filled with dangers beyond imagining. And your role as Alliance officers will be to protect civilized species from threats they cannot face alone. He deactivated the hologram, and the lights in the lecture hall brightened. Next session, we will discuss defensive protocols for encounters with Deathworld fauna. Dismissed. The cadets began filing out of the room. Chattering excitedly about what they had learned, Katie gathered her belongings slowly. Waiting for the crowd to thin, Danny appeared at her side. His expression a mixture of amusement and frustration. "Can you believe that guy?" He whispered. "He just called our home a nightmare planet where nothing intelligent could survive." "Keep your voice down," Katie murmured back. "We are supposed to be fitting in, remember?" Danny snorted softly. "Hard to fit in when they think we should not exist." They walked out of the lecture hall together, and Katie could not help glancing back at Professor Rixdale as he organized his notes. He had spent his entire career studying creatures like the one she had grown up alongside. She wondered what he would think if he knew the truth about where she came from. She wondered if he would be fascinated or terrified, probably both. She decided that seemed to be the usual reaction. The corridor outside the lecture hall was crowded with cadets discussing what they had learned, and Katie could hear fragments of their conversations as she walked. "Did you see the size of those claws?" A Valkyrie was saying to his companion. "I cannot imagine facing something like that in combat." Katie kept her expression neutral as she passed them. She had faced things with claws before, not in combat, but in the woods behind her family's farm in Montana when she was 14 years old. A mountain lion had wandered onto their property looking for easy prey among the chickens. Her father had handed her a flashlight and told her to make noise while he grabbed his rifle. The memory felt very far away now, separated by light years and the vast strangeness of the galaxy. Danny caught up to her near the transport hub, where cadets waited for shuttles to different parts of the Academy complex. "Katie, we need to talk about this," he said quietly. "There is nothing to talk about," she replied. We have our orders. Orders to let everyone think we are some kind of impossible anomaly? That professor just told an entire class that nothing intelligent could evolve on Earth. Katie sighed and pulled him into a quieter alcove away from the main traffic. I know how frustrating this is, but the diplomatic course was very clear. Humans are new to the Alliance, and we need to build trust slowly. By hiding who we are? By not scaring everyone before they get a chance to know us. Danny leaned against the wall and crossed his arms. My grandfather was a Marine, and my father was a firefighter. I come from a long line of people who ran toward danger instead of away from it. And now I am supposed to pretend that I am just like everyone else? Katie understood his frustration better than he knew. She thought about her own childhood, about the summers spent hiking through wilderness where bears and wolves still roamed. She remembered the time she had stepped on a rattlesnake and felt its fangs sink into her boot. Missing her ankle by centimeters, her mother had calmly cut the boot away, checked the wound, and driven her to the nearest hospital while explaining the different types of venom and their effects. That was just how humans lived on Earth, surrounded by danger and adapting to it without panic here in the Alliance. She had seen cadets from other species freeze in terror during basic combat simulations. Things that seemed routine to her were apparently traumatic for beings who had evolved on gentler worlds. Look, she said to Danny, I am not saying we should lie forever. I'm saying we should be smart about this. Let them see that we are good soldiers and reliable allies before we start explaining that we grew up wrestling with apex predators. Danny laughed despite himself. I never actually wrestled a predator. No. But your grandfather probably did. Fair point. A chime sounded through the corridor, indicating that a priority announcement was coming through the Academy's communication system. Attention all cadets. A synthesized voice declared. Commander Zorath requests the presence of human cadets Katie Brooks and Danny Cole in his office immediately. That is all. Katie and Danny exchanged worried looks. What do you think that is about? Danny asked, only one way to find out. They made their way through the Academy's winding corridors to the administrative section where senior officers maintained their offices. Commander Zorath was a Vulthari, one of the reptilian species that made up a significant portion of the Alliance military. He stood nearly 2 meters tall, with dark green scales and eyes that seemed to evaluate everything with cold precision when they entered his office. He was standing behind his desk, reviewing holographic documents. Close the door, he said without looking up. Katie did so, and they stood at attention until he finally raised his head. At ease. Both of you. This is not a disciplinary matter. They relaxed slightly. Though Katie remained alert, she had learned that officers often delivered bad news with a calm demeanor. I will get to the point. Zorath continued. The Academy is hosting a diplomatic delegation from the Vrelian Confederacy starting tomorrow. They are here to evaluate our training programs and make recommendations to their government about Alliance cooperation. Danny shifted slightly. What does that have to do with us, Commander? The Vrelians are one of the factions that opposed human admission to the Alliance. They believe your species is too unknown and potentially too dangerous to be trusted with military training. Katie felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard rumors about the debate over human membership, but she had not realized that active opposition still existed. Their lead diplomat, Ambassador Dreth, has specifically requested a demonstration of our xenobiology curriculum. Zorath explained. He wants to see how we train cadets to recognize and respond to threats from hostile environments. And you want us to participate? Katie guessed the commander's reptilian features were difficult to read, but she thought she detected something like respect in his gaze. Professor Rickstow will be conducting the demonstration in the central amphitheater. And yes, I would like both of you to attend. Not as performers, but as observers. Why specifically? Danny asked. Because the Vrelians will be watching everything. And I want them to see that human cadets are disciplined, professional, and capable of integrating with other species. He paused and fixed them both with a steady stare. I am also aware that Professor Rickstahl's lectures contain certain, shall we say, gaps in his knowledge regarding your homeworld. Katie's heart began to beat faster. You know about Earth? I know what is in your personnel files, and I know that your planet's classification caused considerable debate during the admission process. He stepped around his desk and approached them. I'm not asking you to reveal anything you are uncomfortable sharing, but I want you to be prepared in case questions arise. The Vrelians are not stupid, and if they sense that humans are hiding something significant, it will only increase their suspicions. Katie thought about the lecture she had just attended, about Professor Rickstahl's confident declaration that nothing intelligent could survive on a Class 7 world. She thought about all the creatures he had described with such horror. Creatures that humans had lived alongside for thousands of years. If the truth came out, it would change everything. The Alliance's perception of humanity would shift from curiosity to something else entirely. Perhaps fear, perhaps wonder, perhaps both. I understand. Commander, she said finally, we will be ready. Zorath nodded. Good. The demonstration is at 1400 hours tomorrow. I expect you to represent humanity with dignity. They saluted and left his office. And Katie's mind was already racing with possibilities. She had spent 6 months trying to blend in and avoid attention. Now it seemed like the universe had other plans. Katie, Danny said as they walked back toward their quarters. What are we going to do if someone asks directly about Earth? She did not answer immediately. She was too busy remembering her father's voice on that night with the mountain lion. Calm and steady as he handed her the flashlight. We tell the truth, she said at last, and we hope they can handle it. The central amphitheater was the largest gathering space in the academy. A circular arena surrounded by rising tiers of seats that could hold thousands of spectators. Today, it was less than half full. But the presence of the Vrelian delegation made the atmosphere feel tense and formal. Katie sat with Danny in the middle section, surrounded by cadets from various species, who whispered nervously about the important visitors. The Vrelians occupied an elevated observation platform on the far side of the arena, their pale gray forms visible even from a distance. They were a tall species with elongated limbs and large dark eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Ambassador Dreth sat at the center of their group, his posture rigid with obvious skepticism. Professor Rickstahl stood in the center of the arena floor, his equipment arranged around him in neat clusters. Holographic projectors, specimen containers, and data displays formed a semicircle that would allow him to present his findings to the entire audience. Katie noticed that his antennae were twitching more than usual, a sign of nervousness in his species. Commander Zorath was positioned near the Vrelian platform, ready to provide translation or clarification if needed. He glanced in Katie's direction once and gave an almost imperceptible nod. She understood the message. Be ready for anything, honored guests and fellow officers. Rickstahl began, his voice amplified throughout the arena. Today I will demonstrate the threat assessment protocols we teach to all Alliance cadets. Protocols designed to help them survive encounters with hostile fauna from extreme environments. He activated the first holographic display, showing a rotating image of a serpentine creature with multiple eyes. Let us begin with identification. Can anyone tell me what this creature is and what makes it dangerous? Several cadets raised their hands, and the professor selected a Prolaxian near the front. That is the tunnel serpent of Koros Minor. The cadet answered confidently. It attacks by burrowing beneath its prey and striking from below. Correct. And what is the recommended response? Elevated positioning and sonic deterrence. The serpent is sensitive to certain frequencies. Rickstahl made a pleased clicking sound. Excellent. You see, Ambassador Dreth, our cadets learn not only to identify threats, but to counter them effectively. The Vrelian diplomat said nothing. his dark eyes fixed on the professor with unblinking intensity. The demonstration continued with several more creatures, each one prompting questions and answers from the assembled cadets. Katie noticed that the professor was gaining confidence as the presentation progressed, his movements becoming more animated and his voice more enthusiastic. Then he brought up an image that made her breath catch in her throat. A massive creature filled the holographic display, covered in thick brown fur, with a face that combined flat features with a prominent snout. Its mouth was open, revealing teeth designed for both tearing meat and crushing bone. Its claws were curved like hooks. "Now we come to something special," Ricksdale announced with theatrical flair. "This is a hypothetical reconstruction based on drone footage from the Class 7 world I discussed in yesterday's lecture. We call it a terror bear in the official literature, though the local designation is simply bear." Katie heard Danny make a small choking sound beside her. The image was clearly a grizzly bear, probably based on footage from North America. As you can see, this creature is an apex nightmare, weighing up to 700 kilograms with bite force capable of crushing bone and claws that can shred light armor. He zoomed in on the bear's face. No sentient being could possibly survive an encounter with such a monster, which is why planets hosting such creatures are classified as completely uninhabitable. Katie felt her hand rising before she consciously decided to raise it. Ricksdale noticed and pointed toward her with one of his forelegs. "Yes, Cadet? Do you have a question?" "Not a question, Professor. A correction." The amphitheater fell silent. Even the whispered conversations among the cadets stopped completely. Katie stood up, aware that every eye in the room was now focused on her. "That creature is not hypothetical. It is a real animal called a grizzly bear, and your assessment of its behavior contains several errors." Ricksdale's antennae went rigid with surprise. "Errors? I spent considerable time analyzing the drone footage. What possible errors could there be?" "First, the bite force you described is accurate for the largest specimens, but average individuals are significantly smaller. Second, grizzly bears are not primarily predators of large prey. They are omnivores that prefer fish, berries, and roots." She paused, gathering her courage. "Third, and most importantly, your claim that no sentient being could survive an encounter is incorrect. Humans have coexisted with these animals for thousands of years." The murmuring that erupted through the amphitheater was immediate and intense. Ricksdale made a series of rapid clicking sounds that, as translated, did not convert. "Cadet, I do not understand how you could possibly know this. The Class 7 world has never been visited by any Alliance member." Katie looked up at the Vrelian platform and saw Ambassador Dreth leaning forward with sudden intense interest. Commander Zorth was watching her with an expression she could not read. This was the moment of truth. "I know because that planet is my homeworld," she said clearly. "I am human, and I was born on Earth." The silence that followed was so complete that Katie could hear the soft hum of the holographic projectors. "Professor." Ricksdale stood frozen in place, his compound eyes fixed on her as if she had suddenly transformed into one of his research subjects. "That is impossible," he finally managed. "Earth is a Class 7 death world. Nothing intelligent could possibly, and yet here I am." Katie interrupted. She stepped down from her seat and walked toward the arena floor, her boots echoing in the stunned quiet. "Humans did not just survive on Earth, Professor. We became the dominant species. We spread to every continent, every climate, every ecosystem." She reached the holographic display and gestured toward the image of the grizzly bear. "This animal lives in the region where I grew up. I have seen them in the wild many times. They are dangerous, yes, but humans learned long ago how to coexist with them." Ambassador Dreth's voice cut through the amphitheater, cold and sharp. "Commander Zorth, is this true? Are humans from the Class 7 world in your database?" Zorth stepped forward, his scales gleaming under the arena lights. Yes, Ambassador, it is true. Humanity evolved on Earth and developed spacefaring technology despite the extreme conditions of their homeworld. The Varelian delegation erupted into rapid conversation among themselves. Katie stood in the center of the arena. Feeling exposed and vulnerable, but refusing to show up, Rixtel was staring at her with an expression that might have been fear or fascination or both. How? He asked quietly, his voice barely audible over the growing noise in the amphitheater. How did your species survive? Katie looked at the image of the bear still floating in the holographic display. We adapted. She said simply, we learned, we cooperated. We developed tools and strategies and passed our knowledge to our children. She turned to face the Varelian platform directly. We did not survive by being the strongest or the fastest. Ambassador, we survived by being persistent and adaptable and unwilling to give up. The amphitheater had become a chaos of voices and movement. But Katie remained still in the center of it all. She had spent 6 months hiding what she was. Now everyone knew. The question was what they would do with that knowledge. Commander Zorath raised his hand and the amphitheater gradually fell silent. Though the tension in the air remained thick enough to feel, Ambassador Dreth had descended from the observation platform and now stood at the edge of the arena floor. His dark eyes fixed on Katie with an intensity that made her want to step backward. She held her ground. This changes everything, the ambassador said, his voice carrying through the space without amplification. You have been hiding the truth about your origins. We were advised to integrate slowly. Katie replied carefully. The Alliance diplomatic corps felt that revealing too much too quickly might create unnecessary fear. Unnecessary? Dreth made a gesture that might have been a laugh in his species. You are telling me that there is a species of apex predators from a Class 7 Deathworld, and you expect us to believe that fear would be unnecessary? Danny had made his way down from the seats and now stood beside Katie, presenting a united front. Ambassador, may I speak? Dreth waved a long-fingered hand in permission. Humans do not see ourselves as apex predators, Danny explained. On Earth, we were never the biggest or the strongest or the fastest. We were just the most stubborn. Professor Rixtal had recovered enough from his shock to rejoin the conversation. I have studied Deathworld fauna for 30 cycles, and I have never encountered a sentient species that evolved on anything above a Class 4 world. The environmental pressures would be too extreme for the development of higher intelligence. And yet humans developed art and music and mathematics and spaceflight. Katie said, not despite our environment, but because of it. The challenges we faced forced us to think creatively, to cooperate, to plan for the future. Zorath stepped forward. Perhaps a more detailed presentation would help. Cadet Brooks, are you willing to share specific information about your homeworld? Katie hesitated for only a moment. Yes, Commander. She turned to Rixtal. Professor, may I use your display equipment? The Selenari scientist gestured toward his array of devices with obvious curiosity. Please. I find myself eager to learn. Katie accessed the holographic projector and began searching through the Alliance database for Earth-related files. Most of them were marked as classified or restricted. But there were enough publicly available images to make her point. She pulled up a photograph of a great white shark, its jaws open to reveal rows of serrated teeth. This is one of the ocean predators you mentioned in your lecture. Humans swim in waters where these animals hunt. She changed the image to show a massive elephant. This creature weighs over 5,000 kilograms and can charge at speeds that would crush any being in its path. Humans have worked alongside them for centuries. Another image appeared. This one showing a mosquito greatly enlarged. This tiny insect has killed more humans throughout our history than any other animal. It spreads diseases that have shaped our entire civilization. She continued cycling through images. Venomous snakes coiled to strike. Storms of lightning splitting dark skies, volcanic eruptions sending ash clouds miles into the atmosphere, earthquakes reducing cities to rubble. Earth is not just dangerous because of its wildlife, she explained. The planet itself is constantly trying to kill us. Tectonic activity creates earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Weather patterns spawn hurricanes and tornadoes. The star we orbit bombards us with radiation that causes cellular damage. Ambassador Dreth had moved closer during her presentation, his skepticism apparently giving way to genuine interest. And humans survived all of this? How many of your species died before you achieved technological civilization? Billions, Katie answered honestly. Countless billions over hundreds of thousands of years. We evolved from smaller, weaker ancestors who had to outthink their predators because they could not outfight them. She pulled up one final image. A photograph of a human family standing together on a mountain peak. But survival was never our only goal. We also created beauty. We wrote poetry and composed music and painted pictures of the world that was trying so hard to kill us. The amphitheater was completely silent now. Every being present absorbed in what they were hearing. Danny took over the presentation, pulling up different images. Here is a human running a marathon over 40 kilometers without stopping. We evolved to pursue prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. He showed another image of a human swimming in open ocean. Here is a human crossing between islands, using only their own body. We can survive in water for hours if necessary. Another image appeared. This one showing a human carrying another human on their back through burning wreckage. And here is what we do when our fellow humans are in danger. We run toward the fire instead of away from it. Ambassador Dreth made a low sound in his throat. This is what concerns me most. Commander Zorath, you are describing a species that is not only capable of surviving extreme conditions, but is also apparently incapable of abandoning those in need. You see that as a negative? Zorath asked. I see it as unpredictable. Dreth replied. A species that will charge into danger to save others is a species that cannot be easily controlled. How do we know that human soldiers will follow orders when their instincts are telling them to act? Katie stepped forward. Ambassador, may I answer that? Dreth turned his dark eyes toward her. Speak. You are right that humans have strong protective instincts. When we see someone in danger, everything in our nature pushes us to help. But that does not make us uncontrollable. She paused, choosing her words carefully. On Earth, our strongest warriors were always those who protected the weak. Our greatest heroes were not the ones who conquered, but the ones who defended. The same instincts that make us run toward danger also make us fiercely loyal to those we serve alongside. Danny nodded. We did not join the alliance to conquer anyone. Ambassador, we joined because we found others worth protecting. That is what humans do. We find something worth fighting for, and we do not give up. The silence that followed stretched on for several long seconds. Then Ambassador Dreth did something unexpected. He lowered his head in what appeared to be a gesture of respect among his people. I came here, believing that humans were a threat that needed to be contained, he said slowly. I am beginning to think I may have been wrong. He raised his head and looked at Commander Zorath. I will need to report this to the Confederacy Council. But I can tell you now that my recommendation will be different than I originally planned. Zorath inclined his reptilian head. We appreciate your openness to reconsidering. Ambassador. Dreth turned back to Katie and Danny. You two have given me much to think about. The galaxy has been afraid of Deathworlds for as long as we have known they existed. Perhaps it is time to consider that the beings who survive such places might have something valuable to offer. He paused. Or perhaps I am simply impressed by your courage in revealing yourselves when you could have remained hidden. Katie allowed herself a small smile. Hiding was never going to be permanent. Ambassador, humans are many things, but we are not very good at pretending to be something we are not. Professor Rickstall made an excited clicking sound. This is extraordinary. I have so many questions about your evolutionary history, your physiological adaptations, your cultural development under such extreme selective pressures. Katie looked at the professor and saw that his fear had completely transformed into scientific enthusiasm. I would be happy to answer your questions, Professor, but perhaps we could continue this somewhere less public? She gestured around the amphitheater, where hundreds of cadets were still watching with expressions ranging from awe to terror of Rickstall's. Antennae drooped with embarrassment. Yes. Of course, I apologize for my excitement. Commander Zorth addressed the assembled cadets. This demonstration is concluded. All cadets are dismissed to their regular schedules. As the amphitheater began to empty, Katie felt Danny's hand on her shoulder. Wow, he said quietly. So much for keeping a low profile. Katie watched Ambassador Dreth ascending back to the observation platform, already engaged in rapid conversation with his delegation. I think our profile just got a lot higher. She was not sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but she knew there was no going back now. 3 weeks had passed since the demonstration in the central amphitheater, and the Academy had not stopped talking about what had happened. Katie had become something of a celebrity among the cadets. Though she was not entirely comfortable with the attentions, some species looked at her with newfound respect, others with barely concealed fear, and a few seemed to be struggling to reconcile the quiet human they had. Known with the Deathworld survivor, she had revealed herself. Tabishi was walking through the botanical gardens near the science wing when a familiar clicking sound made her turn. Professor Rickstall approached along the winding path, his compound eyes reflecting the colorful alien flowers that lined the walkway. Cadet Brooks, I was hoping I might find you here, he said. Someone told me you spend time in the gardens between classes. Katie smiled slightly. I grew up surrounded by nature. Even alien plants make me feel more at home than metal corridors. The professor made a gesture that his translator interpreted as acknowledgement. I wanted to speak with you privately. If you have time. Of course, Professor. They walked together through the garden, past glowing fungi from Celos, prime and crystalline flowers from the Velthury homeworld Rix. Tal was silent for several moments before finally speaking. I have spent my entire career studying Deathworlds from a distance, he began. I built my reputation on describing the horrors of extreme environments, on cataloging the monsters that lurk in places no civilized being would ever visit. He paused beside a small fountain filled with bioluminescent water, and then you stood up in my lecture and told me that everything I thought I knew was incomplete. Katie was not sure how to respond. I did not mean to embarrass you. Professor, embarrass me? Rickstall made a sound that might have been laughter. You did far more than embarrass me, Cadet. You transformed my understanding of the universe. He turned to face her directly. I realized after our demonstration that I had been studying Deathworlds the wrong way. I was so focused on the dangers that I never considered what kind of beings might adapt to overcome those dangers. And now? Kitty asked. Now I am rewriting my entire curriculum. I have requested access to all available files on Earth and human evolutionary history. I am preparing a new lecture series that focuses not on the monsters of extreme environments, but on the survivors. Katie felt a warmth spreading through her chest. That sounds like important work. It is work I could not do without your help. Rickstall continued. I know more about Deathworld fauna than almost anyone in the Alliance, but I know almost nothing about what it means to actually live on such a world. He made a respectful gesture with his forelegs. Would you be willing to serve as a consultant for my research? I would compensate you for your time, of course. and your input would be credited in all publications. Katie considered the offer. For 6 months, she had tried to hide what she was. And now she was being asked to help educate the entire Alliance about her people. I would be honored. Professor Rickstall as Antony rose with obvious pleasure. Excellent. I have so many questions about persistence hunting, about your tolerance for temperature extremes, about your ability to consume such a wide variety of organic compounds. Katie held up a hand. Perhaps we could start with something simpler, like why humans keep pets that could easily kill us. The professor's compound eyes widened. You keep dangerous animals as companions. On purpose? We find them comforting. Rickstall made a series of clicking sounds that his translator could not interpret. Katie suspected they were expressions of disbelief. Later that day, she received a summons to Commander Zorath's office. Danny was already there when she arrived, standing at attention with an expression she could not read. At ease. Both of you, Zorath said from behind his desk. I have news. He pulled up a holographic display showing the seal of the Vrelian. Confederacy. I received word this morning that the Confederacy Council has voted to formally support human integration into the Alliance military. Ambassador Dreth personally argued in favor of the motion. Katie felt her knees weaken with relief. That is wonderful news. Commander, it is. And you two are largely responsible for it. Zorath stood and walked around his desk to face them directly. The ambassador sent a personal message for you both. He said, and I quote, "The courage to reveal truth when lies would be easier is the mark of beings worth trusting." Danny cleared his throat. Does this mean we can stop pretending to be harmless? A rare hint of amusement crossed the commander's reptilian features. I do not think anyone in the academy considers you harmless anymore, Cadet Cole. But you can certainly stop hiding your capabilities. He handed them each a data chip. These are orders promoting you both to advanced training programs. You have demonstrated exactly the kind of character we need in Alliance officers. And I want you both developing your skills at the highest level. Katie looked at the chip in her hand 6 months ago. She had arrived at the academy feeling like an imposter. A Deathworld survivor, pretending to belong among civilized beings. Now, she was being promoted because of exactly what she had tried to hide. Thank you. Commander, she said, we will do our best to deserve this opportunity. I have no doubt that you will. As they left the office, Danny let out a long breath. Can you believe it? Advanced training, the Vrelians on our side, and Professor Rickstall writing a whole new curriculum about us. Katie nodded slowly. It is a lot to process. You do not sound happy. She stopped walking and turned to face him. I am happy. I keep thinking about all the other Deathworld species that might be out there. Beings who survived impossible conditions and developed intelligence against all odds. Danny frowned. What about them? The Alliance spent centuries believing that nothing good could come from extreme environments. They looked at places like Earth and saw only monsters, never potential allies. She started walking again. I hope our example changes that. I hope the next time someone discovers a Deathworld civilization, they approach with curiosity instead of fear. Danny fell into step beside her. You really think there are others out there? Other species like us? The universe is vast, and if Earth could produce humans, then other extreme worlds could produce their own survivors. She smiled. Maybe someday we will meet them, and we can share notes on how to make friends with predators. The next morning, Katie entered the lecture hall for Professor Rickstall's first revised class. The room was packed with cadets from dozens of species, all of them eager to learn about the new perspective on Deathworld evolution. She took a seat in the front row. No longer hiding in the back, Rick still stood at the podium, his antennae high with excitement. Welcome to Xenobiology of Extreme Environments, he announced. In this course, you will learn about the most remarkable creatures ever discovered. being so adaptable and resilient that they thrived in conditions that should have been impossible. He activated the holographic display, and an image of Earth appeared, blue and green and beautiful. We begin with the Class 7 world called Earth, and the extraordinary species that calls it home. He gestured toward Katie, a species that is now counted among our most valued allies. Katie felt the eyes of every cadet in the room turn toward her. She no longer felt like hiding. She had spent her whole life being shaped by a world that tried to kill her, and that experience had made her strong enough to bridge the gap between fear and understanding. Galaxy had spent centuries dreading the beasts of Deathworld. No, they were beginning to realize that those beasts might become their greatest friends. Katie smiled as the professor began his lecture. This was only the beginning.